Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I am so glad you're here. It's been a while. I have missed you, but I'm super excited to be back, especially doing this video. And you can expect to see a couple more videos from me in the future, although they'll be a little fewer and further between. But today we're here to talk about the knife that is in this box. You can see the title. You may have seen some videos on this knife already, but you haven't seen this video. This one's going to be pretty awesome, and I'm super stoked about it. So this is the Solaris from Orion Knives, and as you can see from the decorations on the table, I'm a total nerd when it comes to space, NASA, astrophysics, all that kind of stuff. I really dig it. It's super interesting to me, and I'm going to drop a little bit of knowledge on you about kind of the name of the company that maybe you haven't heard before. And so let's go ahead and open this box. You'll notice the Orion Knives logo here. We got 3 stars, and let's go ahead and get the knife out so we can go ahead and look at that. So there it is. There's your packaging. We'll talk about this open space here a little later on, but here is the Solaris from Orion Knives. And on the table, I've got a couple mission patches from some NASA missions, my little Earth orb here, one of my favorite books, even a knife with an astronaut on it. But I'm going to move this because there can only be one knife. This is my prop, my stand. There can only be one knife in this video. And if you're into this kind of stuff, here's a couple other books. So this one is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, Letters from an Astrophysicist, Death by Black Hole, all of these by Neil deGrasse Tyson. NDT is my man. And then also the classic Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. So enough nerd stuff. So let's get into it. So the Orion Knives Solaris. Let's first talk about the company name because I think it's really interesting and there's some cool stuff about it that you may not know. So let's do some fun stuff to start with. So Orion it's a constellation, right? I think most of us know that. And in Greek mythology, it represents a warrior. Orion was the son of Poseidon, and in the constellation there are 3 stars which represent Orion's belt. And David, who designed this knife, and we will talk about David, aka Blade Banter, he named his company Orion Knives, and he's got the Orion's belt, the 3 stars here, because he has 3 sons. And they happen to be triplets, which is really cool. But here's what's cooler. Orion's belt, the actual stars, they have names, right? All the stars have names. Betelgeuse is one of the stars in the Orion constellation, but the 3 stars that make up his belt are called Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Those are the 3 stars that make up Orion's belt. And those also happen to be the names of David's 3 sons. That part's a joke. Those are not his sons' names. That would be silly, wouldn't it? No, those are not his sons' names, but those are the names of the 3 stars that make up Orion's belt. So a little fun fact for you also, the model name here is the Solaris, and that is a Latin word, and what it means is of the sun. Now, of course, it's referring to the sun as in the star closest to Earth, but I think there's kind of a play on words there with son in that David has 3 sons. So I think the name of the company is genius, and I totally dig it because I'm a dork. And the name of the model being Solaris, meaning of the sun, it just kind of ties in that reference to his 3 boys. So there's a little astrophysics, or I guess astronomy for you. So let's get into the knife. What are we looking at here? The Orion Knives Solaris. Let's get some quick kind of specs out of the way, down and dirty. That way, if you just want to kind of come and go, you can go ahead and do that. So this is a Kickstarter campaign. So this knife will be available. It is available as we speak, as you're seeing this video, to go ahead and support on Kickstarter. And if you were to do so, the cost would be $80, and that would be shipped to your door anywhere in the continental US. And the estimated ship date is going to be February of 2021. I know that seems far out, but the reality is when it comes to new knife companies and knife designs, these things take time. So that's just, it is what it is. I went ahead and ordered mine just a couple days ago. So that's what we're looking at there, 80 bucks. Your dimensions here, and we'll just line this up on one of these lines because we're going to bring in a couple size comparisons. Your overall length is 7.84 inches. Your handle length is 4.66 inches, which is also your closed length. The blade length is 3.17 inches, so just a hair over 3. If you have legality issues with blades over 3 inches, just be aware of that. It is just a hair over 3 inches. It is about 1.5 inches tall when it is closed. So this dimension here is about 1.5 inches. So it's broad for sure. So that's that. And the weight is 4.8 ounces. So there's your basic specs on the knife. The handle is G10, as you can see. The blade steel is 14C28N, which is a Swedish Sandvik steel, which I love. It can be carried tip up, either right or left-handed, with that titanium pocket clip that is reversible to this side. So ambidextrous for sure in the way it can be carried. It uses a button lock or a plunge lock for your locking mechanism. It has a flipper tab. It also has thumb studs, and they are removable. And it has multi-row ball bearings for the action. So you have essentially 2 rows, or like 2 staggered rows of bearings on each side, and they are ceramic for a total of 32 individual bearings, 16 on each side. So that makes for a silly, smooth action. I mean, this thing is just, it's smooth as butter. And this is a prototype, of course. This has been around the block. It's visited a few people in YouTube land. So yeah, I can imagine that the production version will be even more finely tuned, and this one's pretty damn good as it is. So there's your specs as far as materials and dimensions. I do want to mention one thing about the blade steel, and then I'll let you know about a few of the different options that you're going to have, because this is not the only option. But first, Sandvik 14C28N steel, which we can see right there marked on the blade. And there's the Orion Knives logo, which looks fantastic, I think. And there's your dual removable thumb studs. 14C28N is my favorite budget steel, and it's not even close. By far my favorite budget steel. And the reason for that is that Sandvik steel, it's again a budget steel. It's not a powdered steel, right? It's not powdered metallurgy like your CPM steels, for example. But the grain structure, right? If you're getting into like the total like steel nerd stuff, the grain structure on Sandvik steel is really, really fine. And what that translates to is the ability for this steel to take an edge that is sharper than you'll ever be able to get on something like D2, 9CR13, AUS 8, all of your kind of, you know, usual suspects as far as budget steels go. They just don't have the grain structure to even be able to get that sharp. Not that they don't get sharp, this simply can get sharper. If you know what you're doing, you can put an apex on this blade that is just objectively sharper than you can get on other steels. Plus it's very stainless. I'm a huge fan. I can't explain that enough, and I've said it in a number of videos. 14C28N is totally my jam. So wanted to mention that. So let's talk about options and timelines and things like that, because Kickstarter campaigns are not uncommon, but for a lot of us, it's not something we've done a lot of. For example, when I purchased my Solaris, when I decided to support the campaign, it was the first time I had ever done that on Kickstarter. So you can support this campaign through September 7th. So it's about a 45-day campaign. It just opened a couple days ago. It's already 40% funded in just about 48 to 72 hours, which is pretty awesome. but you tend to see a little bit of a plateau usually around this time. So I know David's really hoping to see the support continue, but super proud to see it already at 40%. And the expected delivery date for an Orion Knives Solaris is February of 2021. I know that seems like a long ways away, but the reality of a new company and a new design is that they have to fund it, they have to produce it, they have to do their quality control checks, they have to do their testing, they have to do their shipping, and then fulfillment, right? So it does take time, and that's just the reality. So if you have no patience, sorry, but this is a time where you would need to have some patience. I will say though that you're not charged until the campaign is fully funded, because if the campaign isn't fully funded, it's essentially canceled, right? So once the campaign is fully funded and we know for sure it's happening, that's when they're going to charge your card. So you're not technically prepaying until you know for sure that it is happening. So I'll leave links below for all of the information you could possibly need to find information on the knife, on David, the designer, and on the Kickstarter campaign. So check the description if you want that info. A couple other cool things are that there are options. You will have options available to you with this knife. So they will all come in G10 and it'll be black, but you will have two different blade finish options. You will have this satin finish, which is a polished satin. It's a little more polished than I personally prefer. Your other option is stonewash, and that is what I chose when I decided to support the campaign a couple days ago. And then you have these accent colors. So you've got red, an aluminum pivot collar in red, and a G10 backspacer in red. And your other option is blue. So you can do blue or red, and you can do polished satin or stonewash. So my knife will look exactly like this, except it'll have a stonewash blade, and I think it's going to look awesome. And there's actually a rendering of what the stonewash will look like if you go and check out the Kickstarter campaign. So pretty cool options. I really like the fact that there is a interchangeable pivot collar, and it almost looks like kind of a higher end knife in that it has some sort of proprietary pivot tool that you would need, but the reality is it's just Torx, but it's just kind of a little something extra to make it pop. And that ring on both sides is removable, and same with the backspacer in red G10 or in blue. Looks pretty cool. So yeah, I did mention the pocket clip is ambidextrous for tip up right or left-handed carry. It is made of titanium, which is a nice touch to have a kind of more high-end material on a knife like this, and it functions quite nicely. It's not crazy thick, as you can see, right? It's not crazy thick. So if you wear combat pants every day, maybe not the knife for you or the pocket clip for you, but for the other 99% of us, it is going to work just fine. And the action on this thing, you guys, is so stupid smooth. I can't, it just feels good. So some cool options there, which brings me to the box that I mentioned earlier. This little open spot here is kind of a question mark at this point. It may be used to be able to add additional colors in the future, again, depending on how the campaign does. Maybe other color options for your accents, other parts and pieces could come in here. David also talked about getting a custom printed Polka pen to put in here and include with each order. Maybe a custom kind of first production run sticker. So maybe some future opportunity for some bonuses and little goodies in the box. So as I mentioned, this is a prototype, and there's a couple things that are going to change when it goes into production. And as far as changes go, there's not a ton, but one of them is that the flipper tab here, which is not uncomfortable at all, is going to be chamfered on these edges. It's very nicely rounded across the top and bottom, but from side to side, those are also going to be chamfered, so it'll make it super, super comfy. All of the hardware will be size T8 on the production model. So rejoice, right? T8, in my opinion, is the only size that is appropriate, or at least the smallest size that's appropriate. David agrees, so T8 for your Torx hardware. The pocket clip, right, you've got this little space here where you could, you know, flip it to the other side, and they're just going to slightly, just ever so slightly chamfer those corners just to make sure that there's nothing sharp. And it's not sharp now. It caused me zero issues, but he really wants to make sure that it's as streamlined as possible, and that any opportunity to make it more ergonomic and comfy, that he does that. So that'll be another change. And as I mentioned, depending on how this campaign does, David has some stretch goals. And stretch goals are just what they sound like, right? These are goals that could come to fruition if the campaign makes more than they're seeking. And what this campaign is seeking is $25,000. They're already over $10,000. But if he were to make, say, $40,000, then we could be looking at things in the future like JG10, carbon fiber, different blade steels, different, you know, colors of accents that you could choose from. I know one kind of wish list item for David is to be able to offer these in kits where you could actually buy scales individually, blades individually, and all the parts. And you could literally put it together yourself. Not only that, smaller handles and smaller blades, potentially. Again, these are stretch goals. These are things that he'd like to see happen, but I think they're very much within reach. So that's kind of the down and dirty on this knife. As far as performance, I've had this knife for about 10 days. David reached out to me, you know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about David here in a minute. But he reached out to me, and he kind of knew I was taking a bit of a break from YouTube, and he said, "Hey man, would you want to check out this knife?" And I immediately said, "Send it. Like, please send it. I want to check it out." And I've had it and been using it for like 10 or 11 days. I probably had it longer than he would have liked me to. But it's been super cool to have this in my possession, knowing it was designed by a friend, and that he took it from his brain to a physical working prototype, of which I think he had 4 made, and they've kind of gone around the internet. You've probably seen them, but I was super honored to be able to get my hands on it. And I'll say a couple things about it, just kind of some objective things that I've taken note of, and then a few subjective things. So the blade shape I really like. It's a drop point blade. It's a little taller than I would personally prefer, but it's super functional, right? For EDC, I think blade shape is not super important. This did everything I needed it to do for like 10 days. I had to cut through some garden hose to get it to fit into my recycling bin. A garden hose that busted. Broke down cardboard, opened packages, did a little food prep just to test it, and everything worked just fine. It didn't struggle with anything that I threw at it. So as an EDC knife, in terms of its capability, no issues whatsoever. So no real concerns with the blade. It's a flat grind, just as an FYI, and it is stupid sharp. The G10 is, I think, an ideal level of traction. It's done really well. It's not crazy aggressive, but it's not smooth, so it feels good in the hand. The forward finger choil, thank you, David, for making a finger choil that's actually a finger choil. It's generously sized, so you can get your index finger in there. And for me, my thumb kind of lands between the G10 and the spine of the blade. So, you know, for my hand size, I just stretch forward a little bit onto the blade, and that is how I use the knife, or I just do kind of a pinch grip, you know, depending on what I'm doing. So although it may not be perfect for my hand size, it's perfectly usable. I think for smaller hands, you'll be able to use this sort of thumb ramp more naturally, but you definitely need to use this finger choil, because if you choke back, you kind of run out of real estate and it becomes a little unnatural. But as its intended kind of use, it works just fine. The action we already talked about is crazy smooth. You can flip it. You can thumb stud deploy it. You can use the button lock to open it. You can spidey flick it. I mean, you can open this thing a million different ways, which I think is pretty cool. For me, again, with my hand size, my thumb, when I hold the knife lands about right here. So the thumb stud's a little lower than I would prefer, but again, it's still usable. The flipper tab occasionally will kind of bump my finger as I'm using the thumb stud, but it's never failed to deploy. So again, not a major concern, more of just a big hand issue. But otherwise, yeah, it performed well, it carried well, and it did everything that a knife should do, as far as I'm concerned. Is it my perfect knife? Well, no, it didn't come out of my brain, it came out of David's. And I'm just super proud of David to have done this, because he's spent a tremendous amount of time and a tremendous amount of his own money to bring this to fruition and get the campaign going. The campaign's doing well, and it's just super, super awesome. David is an exceptionally nice person, and he kind of took me in, so to speak, when I first started this YouTube channel, in that I only had a few hundred subscribers, and he invited me to join a pass around group that he essentially manages and facilitates, the Apex pass around group. And that's something that he spends a tremendous amount of time on. He builds relationships with manufacturers and distributors and gets knives into the hands of YouTube reviewers. And he does this on his own time and on his own dime. And he works really hard at it. And he has a full-time job, and he has triplets who are very small, like they're babies. So just a great guy, a family man, a member of this community. He's just a knife dude, right? David is a knife dude, and he decided, I'm going to make a knife. And as much as I would like to say I could design a knife, you know, that's my perfect knife, maybe I couldn't, because there's a lot more that goes into it than I think most of us realize. So David, if you're watching, I am super proud of you. I couldn't be happier for you. I am more than happy to be supporting your campaign. I'm looking forward to getting mine in February. I'm gonna have to be patient, right? But that's the way it goes with these sort of things. So if this speaks to you in any way, whether it be the knife itself or just wanting to support David and kind of his endeavor and what he's doing, all the links are below where you can go and support this campaign and get yourself an Orion Knives Solaris. And again, this is a new company that he has started. This is his first design. The sky's the limit, right? We never know what's going to come in the future, but I'm excited to kind of follow along the journey and be, you know, to be able to call David a friend and, dare I say, a mentor at times. So just super proud of him. I know this video is longer than most, although mine tend to kind of be on the longer end, but I really wanted to cover kind of the objective stuff as far as the knife is concerned. Give you a little of the dorky space history, and talk about David. Here's a couple quick size comparisons before we go. There's your Paramilitary 2, and there's your Bug Out. It's basically right between the two. Medium-sized EDC folder, and for EDC tasks, it's going to do everything that these other knives are going to do. So there it is. Orion Knives Solaris, designed by the knife community's own David, aka Blade Banter. That is it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I appreciate it. If this is the first video of mine you've seen in a while, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the knife and on the Kickstarter campaign, but I'd also just love to hear from you. So please put a comment down below. I'd love to chat. I'm definitely taking sort of a break from YouTube, but I'm still quite active on Instagram, and I am very accessible there. Link is in the description to my Instagram account. You can follow me there. You can send me messages. We can chat back and forth. So yeah, I haven't heard from some of you in a while because I haven't been posting videos, and I deleted Facebook, kind of limiting my social media a little bit, but give me a shout on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you, and drop a comment below. I think that's enough for now. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you soon.